My name is Keith Hodgson, Assistant Professor of Music Education at the University of the Arts in Philadelphia and Director of Education for Zeswitz Music Company in Reading, Pennsylvania. This podcast is supported and distributed by Zeswitz Music as part of its commitment to music education and professional development and support of all music educators. Our topic this episode is district data and recruitment success, and our special guest on this episode is Jillian Wu from the Appoquinimink School District in Delaware. Welcome, Jillian.
Hi, thanks for having me, Keith.
Well, why don't we start with a brief background? Could you tell us a little bit about your education and your teaching experience?
Sure, yeah. I grew up in a small town in Massachusetts, right on the border of Rhode Island, but had a great music program, great band program. I left there and went to college at Rhode Island College in Providence, got my bachelor's degree in music education there in 2004. Then as soon as I graduated, moved up to New Hampshire and started teaching. I started by doing elementary general music and middle school band. After just a couple years there, I moved out west and ended up teaching in Arizona and California, doing a variety of different general music and middle school and elementary band things there. Finally came back to Massachusetts and really settled into just doing elementary band back in Massachusetts. And when I was there, I also got my master's degree while I was in Boston and got that from Simmons University in communication management, which kind of seems like an oddball choice, but it's worked out really well for me, actually. And then soon after getting married, moved down here to Delaware, and I've been in Appoquinimink School District since 2015.
Wonderful. Boy, you've been around.
I have.
That's good. Great experiences, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So in your experience, what are some recruiting challenges that you've experienced in your district? Do you think other districts face similar or additional challenges?
Yeah, so obviously, our biggest challenge is just trying to hook them before they get to middle school. We know that kids these days, especially, have a lot of options. They're doing a lot of activities, doing a lot of things. And obviously middle school is where they really start to focus in on the main things that they like to do. So just trying to get them involved and really hooked into the activity as much as we can before they even get to middle school. We do have beginners that start in sixth grade sometimes when they get to middle school, but it's rare. It's not as many as maybe you'd think, and really their opportunity is in elementary school. So we have those 2 years to kind of get it done and hopefully have them stick with the program then through high school. So just getting them involved in the first place is honestly the biggest part of our recruitment challenge.
Is there any specific challenge that you find, like the excuse you get, or that they don't want to do it for whatever reason? Are there any of those kind of challenges? Is there a stigma in the community, or?
No, I wouldn't say that there's a stigma. A lot of it is time. I think a lot of kids are worried that they won't have time to practice, that they won't have time for the activity. Maybe even before they fully learn what we're asking of them, of how much time we're expecting from them, especially at the elementary level. I think for the student and the parents, they just kind of see it as another activity, and we don't have time for another activity. And even before they know what it is that we're going to have them be doing. So that can be daunting. If they're already maxed out, adding another thing onto their plate can sometimes just already be something they're not interested in doing. So just kind of communicating to them what that expectation is, or trying to get them excited about it regardless, and telling them that we will do our best to make it work. That would probably be that biggest challenge as far as a roadblock, that we get why kids wouldn't join in the first place.
Can you describe your recruitment process in Appoquinimink?
Yeah, so we start in the spring, actually, pretty much next week. I have 3 assemblies that we'll be doing, one at each school that I teach at. And in the past, the assemblies have pretty much been myself and then the strings director that I'm with at each school, depending on which school it is. And we kind of team up and show the kids, all the 3rd and 4th graders, the instruments that we have to offer, talk to them about signing up for band or strings, tell them a little bit about the program without boring them. But really, we're there to kind of show them the exciting instruments and get them excited about how to play them and wanting to play them. And then at that time, we also open up our online registration in May. It'll be opening for us this year on Sunday. And once we start that recruiting process, they can sign up at any time between now and usually the third week of September. In the fall, we kind of come around to all the classrooms. We don't do any big assemblies in the fall, but we do go pop into the classrooms in the first couple weeks of school to hand out another thing, saying, here, come register. Hey, we saw you in the spring. If you didn't sign up, you still can. And, just trying to reach out one more time. We also hold info nights for parents. And so typically we've done one in June and then also another one in September. We have in the last couple of years changed a little bit about how we're doing our spring recruitment with COVID. And so we're kind of fine-tuning that a little bit now to see if that's something, how we're going to move forward with that in the future. But in the September, we still are planning to have a parent info night to get them in and really talk through the nitty-gritty of the program and getting a rental instrument and getting signed up before the deadline in September ends.
Can I ask you about the assemblies that you were talking about? Is it just you and your colleague with showing the instruments, or do you involve any of the students in your beginning band, either playing or them seeing? Do they see peers playing?
Yeah, so it's kind of been dependent year to year. Most of the time, it's ended up being pretty much just us demonstrating for the students, just because of it's usually testing season, for classrooms, and so we're kind of limited on when we can see the kids, and then pulling our kids from that, it sometimes is a mess. But we do, when we can have an assembly and have our students perform, then we opt for that. Obviously, that's a better choice. When we're able to do that, we definitely do. And in fact, next week, my 3 assemblies are our band and strings band ensembles performing for the 3rd and 4th graders for that exact reason. So we're trying to utilize that as much as we can when we can.
So I wanted to just touch on the success maybe that you've had this year. You just talked about having the assembly.
Yep.
You weren't able to do that last year, right? And
No.
you go to the classes in the fall, and I don't think you were able to do that last year. So it was all done virtually, right? And you want to share maybe that and how that's worked out, and maybe what your recruitment was like going into this year?
Yeah, so all of last year for our district, we stayed virtual, and we only had 2nd year students. So we didn't have any beginners last year. We kind of just stayed the course with who we already had. It was all virtual until mid-March. And then we kind of integrated back, and we had a handful of lessons before the end of the year. And that was all we were able to do. So when we came back into the buildings in March, we were able to go around to the classrooms, but we weren't able to play on the instruments. We weren't able to have an assembly. We had to go to each individual classroom, which, my step counter for May last year was insane, because going to every school and every classroom was nuts. And all we could do was talk about it. So we did hold our info nights virtually last June, and then also in this past fall, to talk to parents about it. And we were able to, because we couldn't do anything in the schools inside last year, we started a whole new process for ourselves and actually created this outside adventure safari. We called it the instrument safari. And we had people come in cars, because we were still in that zone where people had to stay in cars, and they actually drove through, and we had stations set up in this big parking lot. We had a lot of our middle school and high school students coming to perform on the instruments, to demonstrate them as people kind of drove through and stopped at each instrument station and got to see the instruments and learn about them a little bit. So that was a completely different format than anything we had been able to do previously. And so this year we're kind of still working on, can we kind of combine the two and figure out a new formula to to still have that great experience and still get in the things that we want to do, like our assemblies, and kind of put it together. Because we had a great success with that drive-through safari. Coming back from COVID, from not having any beginners for an entire year, we ended up this fall with 700 beginners in our program, actually a little over 700 altogether, for our 8 elementary schools. So it was amazing. And so we're hoping to just jump on that and hopefully just tweak it and get it even better as we continue to go.
So I just wanted to add to that. That's great. It's such a great story, and I've been sharing that a lot as well. The recruitment, the sign up and the recruitment was done through a website, the recruitment.com website. And
yes.
There were also videos available where students and parents, could see demonstrations, short little demonstrations of all the different instruments that were offered, and see them in a video form through that website too, and then also order their rental instrument and everything through that whole process. So
yes, and the one-stop shop was great because they could go see the videos. So even if they couldn't attend our event, they could still hear the instruments getting played, because we couldn't do that in the school. So the website was huge, because then they could still go and listen and watch and get information about each instrument to make that decision. We don't do any fitting. So that's something that, we've talked about. I know a lot of districts do fittings for their students to try to guide them and maybe even instruct them on what instrument they should be playing. We have not done that in our district ever. And it's been difficult for us to figure out a way to do that, because we have 8 elementary schools, and I don't know how many third graders. There's no way we can get to everyone and do that. It's impossible. It's hard enough just to have an assembly and see everybody with that. So that's why this kind of new way of kind of doing a demonstration and just having a whole day event where people can come in and get the information they need and see the instruments demonstrated. I think that's partially why that worked out so well, because they actually really got to learn about all the instruments equally, and see them in action and see other kids playing them, which is a huge help. So
that's great. So I understand that you've been working on collecting recruitment data for your district. Could you share with us what you've discovered and how you're sharing and using that information?
Yeah. So the beginning of this year, and obviously it's been something that's rattled around, otherwise it wouldn't have happened. But the conversations that I know the elementary team that we've had with secondary over the past few years, pre-COVID even included, because those 2 years we just ignore. But questions to us about instrumentation, and that is one of the factors with not doing fittings, is how do we supply our secondary with an appropriate instrumentation for their ensembles? And that is difficult with our feeder patterns, because depending on which school you're at, and if you're in, let's say, a language immersion program, you go to one school for middle school that may be different from other kids that are not in that immersion program. They go to a different middle school. And so even within one building, our students go to various middle schools. It's not a clear-cut line. So it's difficult for us, because we can have a beautiful band with every instrument, and then the middle school is like, how come I have 20 percussion and no trombones? Well, nothing I can do about that. I don't make the lines. But those conversations kind of led to me kind of thinking about, maybe there's a way that we can do a better job of tracking some of this, and not just the feeder patterns, but really looking at even us as an elementary team. Well, how are we doing with our instrumentation, and how can we improve our recruitment to better serve our students and our program as a whole? And if there is something that we can do to alter that and fix that and improve it, then obviously we should be doing that to help the secondary people. And if it ends up being that, hey, that looks great, and let's see what else are we missing then, and how else can we improve our program as the kids move through secondary, middle school, and high school programs. So that's kind of what started it. And I kind of started going back with our online registration. We have now a handful of years, I think 4 years, of registration data that I can pull from, and that I did go through and pull from, as far as overall numbers of how many kids we have register every year, what the averages are for our registration. We can look at the instrumentation for who signed up for what every year, break it down. We separate band and strings. We separate fourth and fifth grade, so we can also see kind of what those ratios are, and even by school. So we can look at, hey, that school always tends to have a lot of clarinets, and that school doesn't ever have any. What's going on there?
Okay, so I understand that your colleagues have affectionately dubbed you as the spreadsheet queen.
Yes.
Do you want to pull up your
Sure.
spreadsheet and share a little bit about what you've been talking about?
Absolutely. So one of those examples, if we're looking here, so this is an example of that overall data collection. So what I have here is I've gone back to whatever information we had when I started in the district back in 2016. And depending on staffing and how we were running things, we don't necessarily have all the numbers for all the things, but I at least got it started. And so I've kind of at least split it up, and we could see where our numbers were, and for each school, how it split up between band and strings, and gone through for every year that I could to do that. And so we're looking at trends of, our numbers overall increasing. Luckily for us, they've been increasing. At one point, the strings almost doubled in size, and so that was huge. And then, looking towards even each particular school, how many students we tend to get signed up. And I've taken this information and kind of gone one step further as well. See, here's our 705 that we had this year. And kind of, we can look at our highs and lows. We can take this information and figure out staffing needs to bring this to our district office, who love numbers, by the way. They don't want to talk about, well, we feel like we're overworked. Nobody wants to hear that. They want to see why, like, let's look at some numbers. And so we can actually show them and say, listen, we've had this percentage of growth over time, and we haven't hired a new person since 2015. So, something's got to give. And we can really bring this concrete data to them, and also look at the trends ourselves and kind of see, where that's going. And I also...
Jillian, this is terrific. Have you taken it to the administration yet? And what kind of feedback have you gotten?
I did. So with that, I did come up with a whole thing, and did bring that to, we have a new fine arts director that actually will be starting at the end of the school year. One of our high school choral directors is moving to that position. So I met with her and one of our other district supervisors, and presented it to them, and said, like, this is what we're looking at for next year. And, this year we were still kind of catching our breath from COVID, and having no beginners last year. And now moving forward, we're going to need more people, because look at our numbers, and how this is all breaking down. And so they were taking that, they were going to move that to HR, and kind of, they're working on that process now. So we're hoping that can actually then lead to better staffing for our schools as well.
You were catching your breath from COVID with 700 plus beginners.
Exactly. It was like, yeah, we're just trying to swim. Like, we're just trying to hold our head up this year. So yeah, obviously that's going to need to change for next year. We can't do that again.
Well, terrific. Thanks for sharing that success.
Sure.
What's the most valuable tool what's the most valuable tool in the recruitment process in your district?
The most valuable tool is being visible. And that is definitely the best way that we have found to get kids into it. Showing our ensembles when we can, obviously, even through the year, not just during recruitment time, but through the year, trying to showcase our students when we can, as much as we can, in different ways. And every building has some different things. So some buildings, it's, can we get anybody up on the announcements to play their instrument, or showcase a song, or just give a shout out? I know a couple of our directors are very heavy into being visually creative with videos and advertisements, let's say, and they make these even weekly videos sometimes to show the whole school, and making themselves very visible, performing our instruments just as much as we can, and letting people know that we exist in the first place. And then when it's time to recruit, then they already know who we are and what we do and why we're there to talk to them.
That's great. So can you talk about how the relationships that you have with the different levels of band directors in your district vertically, how that impacts retention and recruitment efforts?
Yeah, so it's kind of difficult because trying to get some of our secondary groups down to our elementary schools during our recruitment season, of course, it's concert season for them too. And that would include, getting busing and lining up times, bell time, depending on bell times, and then lunch schedules and all of those things. So it's actually very difficult for us to unfortunately use those secondary schools to our advantage to help recruit. We all wish that could be different, and it's not going to work how things currently are. But even just having the directors pop in and come down and meet the fifth graders even before they get to middle school. I know one of our campuses where we have elementary, middle, and high school all on the same campus. I'm planning to bring my fifth graders up to the 8th grade band. They're going to do a play along. Might even have some high school kids in that as well. And that's going to be huge. We also recently were able at that same school to bring our 3rd graders over and see the high school groups perform. So we're hoping that can have a good impact on our recruitment this year as well. And then we try to, when we do have time, which of course is hard to find, but every now and again we get these pockets where we have to pause our lessons, or we have to condense our groups or whatever. We try to get up to the middle schools to then see our former students as they are moving through the program, and help the directors with sectionals and one-on-one help or whatever else they need up there, just to remind the kids like, hey, we see you, we're still here, we support you, we want you to continue, and just kind of bridge those gaps, between the different levels.
That's fantastic. So as you were talking, I realized we hadn't shared how your district is made up. Can you talk about how many schools in your district and what levels and how that works?
Yeah, so we currently have 8 elementary schools, and starting, I think, in the fall of 2023, we will have a 9th. They're working on building it right now, so we'll be adding. We currently have how many? 1, 2, 3, 4 middle schools, and then we have 3 high schools. We recently, because our area has had exponential growth, actually, and we've had to build new schools. So just in the last couple years, 2-3 years, we've opened a new elementary school. We've started a virtual program that's going to stay, and we have a new middle school and a new high school that have opened just in the last couple years, and another elementary on the way. So anyway, we're growing, and it's just a lot of ground to cover. It's a lot of geographical space, a lot of diversity even within populations within that space. And again, the feeder patterns that with our immersion programs that we're doing in the district, it gets a little confusing on where kids go. But yeah, it's compared to where I grew up in Massachusetts, where we had 2 towns combined in our schools, and my town had 10,000 people in it, and that's it. To me, this is huge, but I do know that obviously other places, I've taught in other places where this is still small compared to what they have.
Wow. So when you were talking about the same campus, an elementary, a middle, and a high school that are on the same campus, are there of the other high schools, do they have middle schools and elementaries that are close to them that form little campuses, or no?
Not really. One of our high schools, there is an elementary on the same campus, but no middle school. And then I do think that is the plan where the now new elementary school is going to be made. That's being built right now. I think down the line, they're also hoping to have a middle school and maybe eventually a high school on that campus as well. I think that's the direction our district is wanting to go as we continue to build. But older buildings, that's not the case. I mean, these were buildings that have been there for, 100 years. I don't know, longer than that, that they're just where they are in the middle of the town, that's just how that goes.
Gotcha. Well, what advice do you have for our listeners about how to approach recruitment?
So recruitment, I have found, especially having taught in a variety of places, with different socioeconomic status, within the communities, way different communities, Massachusetts versus Arizona versus California, now Delaware. And even working with a team of people, I found that recruitment is unique everywhere. The things that you have to deal with where you are, the struggles that each district, each school maybe, or even each individual kind of finds as they're recruiting is going to be individualized. Like you have to kind of play to your strengths and try your best to beef up whatever weaknesses you're dealing with in your district and the hardships that you have with recruitment. Being visible, though, honestly, everywhere I've been, being visible and kids knowing about your program before they have to sign up, giving it to them as, hey, in 2 years, you get to do this. Hey, when you get to 4th grade, when you get to 5th grade, you could be a part of this. Just planting those seeds ahead of time can really make a huge difference, because even when they are in 4th grade, some of these kids are already overbooked and they're already maxed out. And if it wasn't something they were thinking about, it may not happen for them. So just really trying to sit down and look at where your areas of strength and weakness are, in your location, in your community, in your schools, and then as an individual, and really shine a spotlight on the things that you really want to promote in your program. That's really what's going to sell your program the best.
Well, I want to thank you, Jillian, for sharing your thoughts and experiences and expertise with our audience. I personally want to thank you for all you do each and every day for all of your students. And to all our music educator friends, please find opportunities to open more doors for all students to engage with music and engage with you. Thank you to Zeswitz Music and CEO Randy Shayler for your continued support of music education. And thank you very much. We'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you, Keith.